In focus tonight, medical breakthroughs are discovered all the time at Johns Hopkins. But would you roll the dice on an experimental treatment for your own child? Trang Do found one Maryland family who did, and she takes us in depth through the process.
It's called a haploidentical or half-matched bone marrow transplant. Hopkins is the only hospital in the world to use the procedure for diseases other than cancer. Outside of Hopkins, many doctors still consider it to be too risky. But for the Brown family, it proved to be the medical miracle they desperately hoped for. It's hard to keep Nicholas Brown indoors these days. The now healthy, energetic 7-year-old spent much of the first 5 years of his life in and out of hospital beds. A few weeks after Nico was born, his parents made a terrifying discovery.
It was basically blood in his diaper, and it was very scary. We reported it to our doctor immediately, and that began this long path of trying to determine what the cause of that bleeding was. Cancer was what the Browns feared most. It would take 4 months of tests and procedures before doctors diagnosed Nico with chronic granulomatous disease. It's a rare inherited genetic disorder where the immune system can't fight off some types of bacteria and fungi. CGD sufferers often experience ongoing severe infections as a result. When we learned that it wasn't cancer and that it was, this other disease that we'd never heard of, there was some relief initially, but as we started to really absorb what living with CGD was going to mean for Nicholas, we could see that, it was every bit as frightening. It meant taking a whole host of medications every day to prevent infections. Lots of admissions to the hospital, high fevers, restrictions on where Nico could play and swim. By winter of 2012, after 4 hospital stays in 3 months, both Nicholas and his family had had enough. Nico describes the experience in one word.
Painful.
Yeah. Nico's doctors at Johns Hopkins suggested a bone marrow transplant that could potentially cure him. But when Nico's parents and 2 siblings got tested, none were a perfect match. To get this news when we had finally made the decision that we were going to go forward with the transplant, that there were no matches in the family, I mean, it was devastating.
It's a 1 in a million kind of diagnosis.
That's where Dr. Heather Simons came in with another possible cure, a half-matched bone marrow transplant, the technique pioneered at Hopkins. Hopkins Kimmel Cancer Center is the only place in the world offering the treatment for non-cancer diseases.
We proved that it was safe and we proved that it was efficacious, and now we're using these kinds of half-matched transplants a lot more for non-malignant conditions, so patients who don't have cancer, but for patients who have other illnesses that can only be cured by bone marrow transplants.
Parents are half matches for their children and vice versa. Siblings and extended family also have a good chance of being half matches.
It virtually guarantees that any patient in need of a bone marrow transplant has a donor, and that's really revolutionized the ability to do bone marrow transplants because we're not limited by not having a donor anymore.
When the family sought a second opinion at another hospital, they were advised against it.
When you're about to go down the road with a very risky procedure, what you want someone to tell you is, yes, we've done this 50,000 times, and here are our success rates. That sort of data isn't there for this sort of procedure.
Still, the Browns decided to move forward with Dad Lou as the donor.
We really felt like this was going to give Nicholas the best shot that he had ever had to, to actually have a cure. No one else was talking about curing him, right? Everyone else was talking about managing, his illness.
It's my transplant, Nicholas.
For all the agony it took to make the decision, the day of the transplant was pretty uneventful.
It was extraordinary to me that all of this research and all this scientific ingenuity had really come down to like a back, an IV.
Though what followed was a trying time.
We were watching every day, his blood counts, for those to come up, watching his strength and his weight come back up, watching him learn to walk again. It was a total 360.
Seeing Nicholas now, almost 2 years later, it all seems like a distant memory.
Never in my wildest imagination would I have thought that somebody's research interest and their passion, for science would have this kind of, transformational impact on my child's life and the life of my family. The life that we're living now, we couldn't have imagined it, 5 years ago. We couldn't have imagined, the health and the wellness of this child now. And so we're very grateful, very grateful.
Oh, no. Thank you, Hopkins.
All right.
What an amazing story.
What a cute little boy, huh? So the team at Kimmel Cancer Center has performed more than 500 half-match bone marrow transplants since 2003. Last year, they did 41 of these procedures, and about half of them were for non-cancer disorders like sickle cell anemia and other immune diseases, as well as even to prevent organ rejection in transplants.
So, Trang, tell us about the matches and the registry. Why did they opt to not go that route?
You hear a lot about the National Bone Marrow Registry, and the family just felt like they didn't have the time to wait. It's very difficult to find an unrelated donor who is a perfect match. And for African Americans like Nico, the chances of finding a match through donor registries is even smaller. That's less than 10%.
Happy, healthy, busy 7-year-old. Is he cured?
Well, doctors do consider him to be cured. He is off of all of that transplant-related medication that you saw on that table. And he's just monitored 1 to 2 times a year to check for any long-term side effects. So as you saw in the piece, he's just a happy, healthy kid now.
Our hometown hospital, Johns Hopkins. All right, thanks a lot, Trang. Great story for that report.